11. Exactly the opposite is true of the noble one who conceives of the basic idea good by himself, in advance and spontaneously, and only then creates a notion of bad, this bad of noble origin and that evil from the cauldron of unassuaged hatred. The first is an afterthought, an aside, a complementary color, whilst the other is the original, the beginning, the actual deed and the conception of slave morality. How different are the two words bad and evil, although both seem to be the opposite for the same concept, good. But it is not the same concept, good. On the contrary, one should ask who is actually evil in the sense of the morality of ressentiment. The stern reply is, precisely, the good person of the other morality, the noble, powerful, dominating one, but retouched, reinterpreted, and reviewed through the poisonous eye of ressentiment. Here there is one point we would be the last to deny. Anyone who came to know these good men as enemies came to know nothing but evil enemies, and the same people who are so strongly held in check by custom, respect, habit, gratitude, and even more through spying on one another and through peer group jealousy, who, on the one hand, behave towards one another by showing such resourcefulness and consideration, self control, delicacy, loyalty, pride, and friendship, they are not much better than uncaged beasts of prey in the world where the strange, the foreign, begin. There they enjoy freedom from every social constraint. In the wilderness, they compensate for the tension which is caused by being closed in and fenced in by the peace of the community for so long. They return to the innocent conscience of the wild beast as exultant monsters who perhaps go away having committed a hideous succession of murder, arson, rape, and torture, in a mood of bravado and spiritual equilibrium as though they had simply played a student's prank, convinced that poets will now have something to sing about and celebrate for quite some time. At the center of all these noble races, we cannot fail to see the beast of prey, the magnificent blond beast, avidly prowling round for spoil and victory. This hidden center needs release from time to time. The beast must out again, must return to the wild, Roman, Arabian, Germanic, Japanese nobility, Homeric heroes, Scandinavian Vikings. In this requirement, they are all alike. It was the noble races which left the concept of barbarian in their traces wherever they went. Even their highest culture betrays the fact that they were conscious of this and indeed proud of it. For example, when Pericles, in that famous funeral oration, tells his Athenians, "Our daring has forced a path to every land and sea, erecting timeless memorials to itself everywhere for good and ill." This daring of the noble races, mad, absurd, and sudden in the way it manifests itself, the unpredictability and even improbability of their undertakings. Pericles singles out the rathemia of the Athenians for praise. Their unconcern and scorn for safety, body life, comfort, their shocking cheerfulness and depth of delight in all destruction, in all the debauches of victory and cruelty, all this, for those who suffered under it, was summed up in the image of the barbarian, the evil enemy, perhaps the Goth or the Vandal. The deep and icy mistrust that the German arouses as soon as he comes to power, which we see again even today, is still the aftermath of that inextinguishable horror with which Europe viewed the raging of the blond Germanic beast for centuries. Although, between the old Germanic peoples and us Germans, there is scarcely an idea in common, let alone a blood relationship. I once remarked on Hesiod's dilemma. When he thought up the series of cultural eras and tried to express them in gold, silver, and iron, he could find no other solution to the contradiction presented to him by the magnificent, but at the same time so shockingly violent world of Homer, than to make two eras out of one, which he now placed one behind the other. First, the era of heroes and demigods from Troy and Thebes, and as that world retained in the memory of the noble races, who had their own ancestry in it. Then the Iron Era, as that same world appeared to the descendants of the downtrodden, robbed, ill-treated, and those carried off and sold, as an era of iron, hard, as I said, cold, cruel, lacking feeling and conscience, crushing everything and coating it with blood. Assuming that what is at any rate believed as truth were indeed true, that it is the meaning of all culture to breed a tame and civilized animal, a household pet, out of the beast of prey, man, then one would undoubtedly have to view all instinctive reaction and instinctive ressentiment, by means of which the noble races and their ideals are finally wrecked and overpowered, as the actual instruments of culture, which, however, is not to say that the bearers of these instincts were themselves representatives of the culture. Instead, the opposite would be not only probable, no, it is visible today, these bearers of oppressive, vindictive instincts, the descendants of all Europeans and non European slavery, in particular of all pre Aryan population, represent the decline of mankind. These instruments of culture are a disgrace to man, or a ground for suspicion of, or an argument against, culture in general. We may be quite justified in retaining our fear of the blond beast at the center of every noble race and remain on our guard, but who would not, 100 times over, prefer to fear if he can admire at the same time, rather than not fear, but thereby permanently retain the disgusting spectacle of the failed, the stunted, the wasted away, and the poisoned? And is that not our fate? What constitutes our aversion to man today? For we suffer from man, no doubt about that. not fear, rather, the fact that we have nothing to fear from man, that man is first and foremost a teeming mass of worms, that the tame man, quote unquote, who is incurably mediocre and unedifying, has already learned to view himself as the aim and pinnacle, the meaning of history, the higher man. Yes, the fact that he has a certain right to feel like that insofar as he feels distanced from the superabundance of failed, sickly, tired, and exhausted people of whom today's Europe is beginning to reek, and insofar as he is at least relatively successful, at least still capable of living, at least saying yes to life.